Inside me, there are two gay wolves. The first one is the good guy, the idyllic art critic in me, who values artistic integrity over all things. He says that Halo 4, 5, and Infinite aren't worth getting impassioned over simply because Master Chief's story was wrapped up so well in 3. And within me exists another gay wolf, an unwashed, greasy, stinky, basement-dwelling consumer, spelled with 2 O's, who just wants to consume more things with the Halo name attached to it. And so, because I'm a huge fan of the OG games, and because I like to give into the urges of the consumer more than I'd like, I've been following each of 343's games up to Infinite. In my previous video, I talked a little bit about the game and some of its flaws. After going back and getting some footage, I realized that I enjoyed it a little bit more than my first couple of playthroughs as it first came out. So I thought that it'd be nice to replay it a couple more times and put all my critique and praises into a single video. Additionally, I won't really be delving too deep into the multiplayer aspect of Halo. While it's definitely a huge part of it, the campaigns are what I'm passionate about, and it's what I want to talk the most about. Furthermore, I'm very aware that my opinions are far from hot takes, as my mostly negative perception of 343 isn't unpopular at all. In fact, pretty much everyone and their mothers hate 343 Studios nowadays, which is a good thing since people are willing to voice their opinions, but it's also a bad thing because, you know, Halo is in the state it's in. However, this puts much of the content in this video at risk of being uninteresting, boring, and just another 343 hate video. Regardless, I still wanted to make this video just because I like to talk about things that I care about, and also just because I like to make videos. So, in advance, thank you for listening to my diary entry. Bungie, or at least the Bungie that was around when they were developing the Halo games, was not a perfect studio that could do no wrong. As such, each of their games were flawed, just like with basically every game in existence. So I'm not going to pretend that I worship them or anything, but at the same time, I really think that Halo was something special, with or without the nostalgia goggles, and it deserves praise for taking some risks and nailing them on the first try. 343, now known as Halo Studios, who I'll continue to refer to as 343 since it sounds more natural to me, got a shit ton of flack for the new direction they took with the games after they were passed the torch, and the flack they got was very, very deserved. If you want a quick rundown on how 343 scrubbed the series through their swampy ass crack, all you gotta do is watch Crobcat's videos on Halo. There are so many instances of 343 making promises they couldn't keep, then breaking those promises, that it is actually insane how some of these motherfuckers didn't get fired up until recently. That being said, I'm not going to go over a lot of that stuff just because going over the disappointment would take a shockingly long while, and the videos out there that do go over it do a much better job of shitting on 343 than I ever could. So go check out Crobcat's videos if you're interested. Halo should have ended with Halo 3, or at least Master Chief's story should have ended with Halo 3 since it ended on such a perfect note. And I say perfect in all caps, italicized, underlined, and in fucking bold. The ending to Halo 3 was just peak direction, probably my favorite ending to any piece of media ever.
Wake me when you need me.
Bungie themselves were aware of this, and neither of their 2 games past Halo 3 really touched on Chief's actions, and so the existence of 4, 5, and Infinite feels a little like they're spitting on the classic trilogy, simply by virtue of them existing. Of course, Halo 3's legendary ending ends with a sequel bait shot of Halo 4, but the Bungie cocksucker in me wants to believe that that was out of contractual obligation to Microsoft more than it was genuine creative intent. Even if Bungie did want to continue the story, they at least never followed through with a direct sequel. Famous foot fetishist Quentin Tarantino has a funny opinion of a situation similar to this.
But I am a big fan of the Toy Story trilogy. In the case of Toy Story, the third one is just magnificent. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. And if you've seen the other 2, then it's devastating. But the thing is, then 3 years later or something, they did a 4th. And I have no desire to see it.
Right.
You literally ended the story as perfect as you could.
Right.
So, no, I don't care if it's good. I'm done.
Why put the...
I am done. It can still be good, but I'm done.
Perhaps a nice compromise 343 could have made is to make a brand new protagonist with a brand new AI girlfriend, or maybe used an existing Spartan like Jerome. But these are just that, compromises, and in an ideal world, the series should have ended while it was good. One thing entertainment industries are so fucking persistent with nowadays is puppeteering the corpses of once memorable intellectual properties, and in an alarmingly high number of cases, continuing them with a lower bar of quality. Think Star Wars, think The Simpsons, think so many fucking other pieces of media that had remarkable cultural impact that should have just died leaving a good taste in our mouths, but just didn't because soulless companies love to make money and consumers love to dump money to consume things that have the names of familiar established IPs slapped onto them. You might say, the addition of these new worse games don't hurt you or the originals in any way since you still have access to the old ones. But I'd beg to differ. The existence of the newer shittier games harms fans like me because I want new good games, but I don't get new good games. They diminish the impact of the originals themselves because of the issue I mentioned above, and they ruin and devalue the reputation of the franchise as a whole because newcomers who might have ended up going back to play the old games might start out with the new shittier games and think, wow, this is shit, associating the garbage with stuff that isn't garbage, and end up never touching the old games and telling everyone that it's just shit as a result. Which is really sad because younger gamers and gamers new to the series deserve quality games. 343 deserves the pillory and tomatoes to the face, and a shit ton of tomatoes at that, but I also think that they deserve a little bit of praise. Just a tiny bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a 343 defender, as you'll find out later in this video how much I detest them for running one of my favorite games into the ground. Things got a lot worse before they got marginally better, but at least they seem to be taking steps in the right direction. Unfortunately, taking steps in the right direction is all modern AAA game devs seem to be doing nowadays. For instance, one of the few areas I'm actually quite impressed with is the weapons sandbox. I'm still surprised at the quality of the sandbox in Halo Infinite. There are a large number of weapons in the game, but that by itself doesn't mean anything. You can have 1 billion guns a la Blandy Bitchford's Borderlands, but if they all do the same thing with slightly different values, then that huge number is meaningless. Infinite isn't totally off the hook here, as it still has slightly different variations of the same guns, which still do basically the same thing as their originals. The important part is that each of the weapons, with the exception of a few like the plasma pistol, have strong identities of their own, which is a clear improvement from not only their own Halos, but even Bungie's Halos. 2 and 3's arsenal included mostly human and Covenant weapons, but they really just felt like equivalents of each other. For example, in 2, there's the battle rifle and the carbine, both medium-range headshot-focused weapons with a decent rate of fire. There's the sniper rifle and the beam rifle, both long-range shield-shredding or insta-killing monsters. There's the rocket launcher and the fuel rod gun, both, well, rocket launchers for lack of better words. Too large of a number of the human and Covenant weapons are basically equivalents of each other, despite being manufactured for completely different groups of species from different planets. If you think about it past their gameplay implications, it starts to become a little bit immersion breaking. Shouldn't alien weapons be a little bit more alien? In an attempt to fix this, Bungie started implementing some small sandbox changes of their own, like Halo Reach's focus rifle, replacement of the beam rifle. The focus rifle is kind of a low B-tier weapon in comparison to the beam rifle, but it at least helped to differentiate the alien weapon from the human weapon. 4 took a step backwards though, and added Forerunner weapons in almost the exact equivalent fashion with the same problems as previous games. Most of them were still just battle rifle, assault rifle, sniper rifle, and rocket launcher equivalents. So it came as a welcome surprise to me when I found that 343 decided to do a design by subtraction kind of thing for Halo Infinite, where they just outright scrapped some weapons that felt too samey to other weapons, and many of the new additions to the armory are actually really great thoughtful inclusions. Like the Mangler, for example. The Mangler is a great stand-in for the CE and Reach Magnums because while it's still a headshot weapon, now there is much more nuance. While the projectiles are much stronger, the projectile speed and fire rate is much slower and the bullet drops off after a short distance. Meaning instead of just pointing at the enemy's head and spamming the fire button all the time, you have to line up your shots much more deliberately than the Magnum, especially from a distance, because you have to account for the slow fire rate and the bullet drop. It's not all good though, because there are still some holdovers and glaring flaws. For instance, the battle rifle shares the sandbox with the commando. They both are headshot weapons that function almost the exact same in the sandbox, as they're both good in close range, fantastic in medium range, and then back to good again in long range. The only real difference between them is just that the Commando is more ammo efficient, since it has the capability to fire in single shots rather than the 3-round bursts like the battle rifle. Additionally, but to a lesser extent, there's the Sidekick, which is just like the other two, but with a shorter range and less ammo. Anyway, while there are still some flaws, I think that Infinite's weapon selection has the potential to shine brighter than even 3's, which is something that I'm still surprised to even write out. However, due to some other issues which I'll get to later, the weapon sandbox doesn't get to shine as much as I'd like it to. For now, I'll start with equipment. Infinite has revisited the realm of equipment. I have some mixed feelings about this. In my opinion, as shitty as almost every piece of equipment was besides the bubble shield and regenerator, Halo 3's version of equipment is still the best version for two main reasons. One, they were consumables and not cooldowns. This means that they were treated like any other item you could scavenge on the battlefield, like guns or grenades. Once you used them, they were gone forever. I know that the multiplayer part of Infinite has consumable equipment, but like I said before, the campaign is what I want to talk about. This type of consumable approach Halo 3 takes complements the sandbox perfectly, as they're just basically another layer of resource management, something to weigh and time like any other weapon or grenade. Furthermore, they were rare compared to guns and grenades. You could only find them by quickly taking care of brutes before they could deploy their equipment, or by exploring the map to find them. This rewards the player for having the knowledge of map layouts, as well as having the skill to fuck brutes up quickly. Equipment is something the player earns, in other words. In contrast, Infinite allows innate access to 4 different types of equipment at any time, which you can swap to on the fly via D-pad combo, with their use limited only by their cooldowns. This means that you can zip around on your grappling hook, place down a drop shield, and then shoot a tracking beacon into a group of enemies, without really worrying too much about when and where you use them. Now, don't get me wrong, just because the equipment can be used infinitely doesn't mean that it doesn't present opportunities for skill expression. This kind of system definitely involves more mechanical skill over previous titles. Inputting a Helldiver-ass Konami code button combo to release your entire utility belt mid-combat while avoiding enemy fire definitely takes its own kind of skill. So while I don't love Infinite's cooldown approach, I also don't hate it either. But I also feel like implementing equipment in this style removes a layer of depth, or at the very least, replaces a layer of depth with another layer of depth that doesn't really fit the sandbox as well as the previous layer of depth. This kind of RPG hero shooter cooldown type shit isn't solely the fault of 343 though. Bungie started this trend. The Arbiter had an active camo cooldown in 2 and reached evolve the equipment from 3 into cooldowns. But I was disappointed to see that they didn't improve on it in 4, 5, and Infinite, at least in the campaign side of things in Infinite's case. The second reason why I think Halo 3's version of equipment is better is that with the exception of invincibility and the deployable turret, and probably 1 or 2 others, equipment was mostly neutral. This means that if you drop something like a bubble shield, you're safe from enemy projectiles, but it also means that you can't use your own projectiles through it either. Power Drain you could throw into a group of enemies and shred their shields, but you also have to give it a wide berth, because otherwise your shields will get shredded as well. This creates more nuance on the battlefield, because not only can you use equipment to fuck with enemies, it also forces you to play around how equipment can fuck with you. In contrast, all of Infinite's equipment, at least in the campaign, are basically tools that benefit only you. You could make an argument for the drop shield being neutral since you can't shoot through the front side, but it's designed in such a way where as soon as you deploy it, you are immediately in an advantageous position, where you can harm enemies, but enemies can't harm you. The character that comes with neutral equipment has been lost since Halo 3, and I'm really disappointed they didn't commit to returning it. But even though I just shat on the weapon and utility sandbox just now just because it isn't perfect, I do think that it's still a big improvement over 343's previous Halos, and in the case of weapon selection, even the OG games. To my delight, the gameplay in Halo Infinite is the most fun I've had in a Halo game since before 4 was made, which is honestly such a nice fucking thing to say. However, there's an asterisk. There's a dark looming shroud cast over Infinite's gameplay. I was hoping that Infinite would break the curse each game has had starting from the very first Halo. That curse is the precision weapon meta. If you're playing on legendary mode, in many of the more difficult encounters, many, not all, the player is encouraged to either hug a wall like a hippie or take out enemies from afar since enemies do so much damage. Enemies can fucking shred you to pieces in milliseconds if you linger too close to them, or if you're out in the open. I say that the player is encouraged to take up this medium to long range playstyle, but the player is pretty much forced to use precision weapons if they don't want to blow their brains out dying every 20 seconds or stretch out encounters for a while. There's a reason why the battle rifle and variations of the BR are kings in literally all of the games they're featured in. That's because it has the ability to accurately land headshots from afar while being way more abundant than the sniper rifle or sniper rifle equivalent, which is so very useful, especially on Legendary, where again, staying in close range to strong enemies for more than a couple seconds almost certainly spells your death. While all of the games have this problem, the two games where it's most prominent is Halo 2 and Reach. Halo 2 is just so fucking incredibly brutally difficult on Legendary that if you're not doing speedrun strats and just taking care of business the old-fashioned way, and unless you have some kind of shield shredder and a precision weapon on you at all times during non-flood encounters, you're in for a world of hurt, so you really have to hunker down behind a piece of cover and slowly whittle down enemies. With Reach, it's not as bad, but the enemies feel like they're meant to be headshotted all the time, and so enemies are just more annoying to deal with if you don't have a precision weapon handy. And I want to get this out of the way before you call me a pansy ass. I've beaten each of the Halo campaigns on Legendary like 20 trillion times. So, I think I know what I'm talking about. So I'm not a little bitch, at least when it comes to Halo. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with rewarding players for having the skill to headshot every enemy they come across. Halo is a first-person shooter after all, a genre about pointing to and clicking on heads. And I have to admit, partaking in the sort of battle of attrition that Legendary mode provides can be very satisfying when you come out on top. And Halo Infinite isn't even that difficult, especially when you compare it to Halo 2, so precision weapons aren't nearly as meta in this game as I make it seem. However, part of what makes Halo so unique is its weapon sandbox. Other military shooters are filled to the brim with incrementally different weapons that do the exact same things as every other gun. Halo has variety in both stats and identity. With Halo Infinite, this is even more so the case, which I'm still surprised to say, which means that this problem hurts Infinite even more than the rest of the games because the weapon selection is so good. Furthermore, in Legendary, vehicles can feel like they're made out of paper mache. They absolutely just crumple under small arms fire, even if you're in a tank or a wraith, which makes vehicles more useful as modes of transport from place to place than an actual powerhouse on the battlefield. Infinite has a fantastic repertoire of weapons and vehicles and whatnot at its disposal, and it's a huge shame that basically like half of it becomes non-optimal in Legendary mode. A common argument might be, no one's holding a fucking gun to my head telling me to only use precision weapons. Which is kind of fair. I have done challenge runs where I mostly refrain from using equipment and precision weapons in not only Infinite, but also some other Halos. But regarding that argument, I dislike it because it's defending homogenization. Legendary difficulty punishes players too heavily for not using precision weapons, and turns Halo into any other military-based cover shooter where you just keep planted behind a piece of cover all the time, or just shoot things from super far away. Again, not every single encounter is like this, but far too big a percentage of them are. These games give you beautiful sandboxes full of weird and cool toys, but then quietly tells you not to use like half of them if you want the best chance at surviving in Legendary. And so the precision weapon meta just makes the sandbox feel smaller in my opinion. There has to be a better version of Legendary out there, one that doesn't have all the issues I listed above. Maybe Legendary could have the same enemy damage and health values as Heroic, but also force you to turn on a certain number of skulls. I don't know, something that tests creativity or awareness, rather than just patience or your ability to headshot guys almost all of the time. If you've watched other people's videos on Infinite, you've probably heard that the selection of areas we have to explore is just monotonous and repetitive due to the decision to make Infinite open world. And that is completely 100% true. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. Half of the game is just the Pacific Northwest like in Seattle or some shit, and no difference in biome. There's no real variation to most of the locations you visit in the open world. It's just the serene outdoors, UNSC wreckage, or banished outposts. Don't get me wrong, some of the areas in the open world can be really pretty, pretty ugly, but for real, only some areas in the open world are actually nice to look at, and the indoor foreigner areas are breathtaking. There's absolutely no doubt about that, but only this stuff gets boring after a while. So I definitely agree that there's issues with the lack of variation in locale. ODST had an open world of sorts, and it's much more bare bones than Infinite's, but the inclusion of the more linear levels with their own areas, set pieces and whatnot really helped to mix things up. All of this stuff is more of an issue with art direction than with gameplay. I rarely see anyone take issue with how the open world harms level design. I have a problem with how the open world itself is implemented, but I'll get to that later. Because most of the areas are so wide open, and with a tool as versatile as the grappling hook available to them at all times, the player can approach enemy hotspots like outposts or high-profile targets from any direction. 343 compensates for this by littering every corner of such areas with enemies. In the OG games, more often than not, enemy encounters felt deliberately hand-placed. In Infinite, because there's so many enemies peppered around every corner of areas, it can kind of feel like 343 just haphazardly plopped them onto the map to account for how much freedom the player has. Now, there's nothing wrong with this on its own, but when basically all waypoint-sanctioned encounters in the open world are like this, it can help to emphasize how creatively bankrupt the game is in both gameplay and non-gameplay departments. Furthermore, I said it in my previous video, but I'll say it again. The open world is just poorly thought out padding. It fucking sucks 20 dicks. I hate Ubisoft open worlds with a passion because it feigns discovery while also disincentivizing it by adding map icons and objective markers everywhere. It's fake, phony baloney ass bullshit. I hate the open world meme so much, and I especially hate it when games that were doing just fine without open world suddenly add open world for no reason just because other games are doing it. There's nothing wrong with linearity. In fact, I prefer linearity because it reduces what would otherwise be pointless downtime, where all you're doing is just running or driving from place to place without engaging in any real gameplay. What does it say about the open world when the most stimulating parts of the game aren't out in the open world, but in the smaller, more enclosed legacy areas? It says that the open world fucking sucks, and that the developers didn't care and just threw random bullshit at the game just because open world is an appealing marketing term. Moving on to bosses. Halo doesn't really have a pedigree with bosses unless you count that shitty Warden guy from 5 and Tartarus from Halo 2, who is also shitty to fight. Infinite takes their inclusion of bosses to a whole new level, and now there are tons of bosses littered throughout the open world and in legacy levels. Sadly though, most of the bosses in the game are just lazy bullet sponges. There are way too many of these bullet sponge quote-unquote bosses. Of course, enemies have had a super high time to kill since Halo CE, but with Infinite, it just feels excessive, increasing the feeling of repetition. If you're not going for a 100% run like I have twice, fighting these guys over and over is just pointless fluff. Every assassination contract or high-value target or whatever just ends up being a tanky version of whichever enemy type. Some can be insta-killed via headshot after you get rid of their shields, but then if that's the case, why do they even have health bars and a title in the first place? I'm not totally against these types of boss fights though. I feel like they can be done well if they have interesting movesets or gimmicks. However, most of them just don't. They're either just bullet sponges or they're still bullet sponges, but when you whittle their health down to a certain threshold, they become invulnerable and you've gotta shoot an environmental hazard or something. That's really it. I'm not asking for Metal Gear or Demon's Souls gimmicks, I'm just asking for something other than shoot the guy until he's dead. Oh, sorry, hang on, I'm getting a call. One sec. Hello? Oh my god. So I just got off the phone with Oni Command, and they just informed me that there is a boss fight of sorts that already exists within the Halo franchise that also meets the criteria of having a gimmick other than just shooting the guy until he's dead. The Scarab fights from Halo 3. I'm not sure whether or not the Scarabs can be classified as boss fights, but they sure as hell feel like it. They're perfect dynamic additions to Halo's sandbox because they're not just enemies with a larger health bar than normal. In order to defeat them, you gotta get inside them and destroy their power supply or whatever. And unlike Halo 2's version of the Scarab, they're not only set pieces or moving platforms. They're literal threats on their own. They can kill you with their 2 cannons, and they can kill you by just stepping on you as well. So part of the challenge is getting into one of these guys in the first place. You can do a number of things to do this. You can shoot their legs to get them to kneel down. You can make use of equipment or weapons to platform onto them, or you can use the geometry in the level and simply just jump onto them. And it doesn't end there. Instead of artificially spawning ads mid-fight, like with what Infinite does, the enemies were always in the scarabs in the first place, which not only gives navigating them more challenge, but also helps to give the scarabs that gravitas of being a major enemy carrier. And on top of that, after you deal with the enemies within the scarabs by either getting rid of them or avoiding them, and after you destroy the heart, you have to get far away from the scarab to avoid the huge explosion that can kill you. Like I said, they're the perfect quote-unquote boss additions to Halo Sandbox. So I'm very disappointed that 343 didn't return to this kind of thing. The closest thing that comes to a scarab fight are those anti-aircraft cannons you destroy halfway through the game, but they're static, and the act of destroying them are tied to scripted sequences, which really takes the oomph out of blowing them up in my opinion. The only thing static about the scarab fights in Halo 3 was them just spawning into the arena, which are 10 times cooler than anything Infinite does with their boss fights. Of course, all of these flaws here can be fixed by someone who just knows what focused and tight game design is. If a room temperature IQ individual like myself can point out these flaws, a gazillion-dollar conglomerate like Microdingling can surely find someone who can fix it. Right? Right? Craftsmanship. It's fucking baffling to me how even after how many years of making Halo games, 343 has not once matched the same level of craftsmanship Bungie set the bar for. Craftsmanship is kind of a vague term and it can mean a number of things, but when I say that word, it doesn't just mean gameplay implications. I also mean small, minor details that don't seem like much at first, but really add to the experience in the long run. Think of something as inconsequential as the way explosions look. Take explosions in Halo 3 for example. Halo 3 has actual chunks and bits of vehicle parts connected to physics that are sent flying away in arcs, as well as some really great effects that aged really well, all things considered. Now look at Infinite's. Infinite's lacks that same oomph. You might be thinking, so what, it's just an explosion. Halo isn't about the explosions. And I'd agree with you, it's just a small detail that looks cool. But this is just one of the many things that have been downgraded for no reason, which makes the new game's experiences just feel soulless in comparison. Simple, dumb, and inconsequential things being downgraded for no reason, like the main menu screens for example. Look at Halo 2's main menu. It really sets a mood, right? Then look at Halo Infinite's. And then there are just the graphical issues. I'm not really good at describing technical graphical issues, just because I'm too dumb and I don't really know what any of these fancy pants terms mean, but the game just looks cheap most of the time. There are some places that look beautiful, like the indoor Forerunner areas, but those areas are the exception. Somehow, the first level in Halo 3, a game from 2007, looks better than the entirety of the open world in Infinite. As much as I like to shit on 343 for their shitty craftsmanship, one thing I have trouble finding them at fault for is their quality of music. I'm pretty sure they can't just throw money at the issue and get a guy as good as the previous guys. I'm of the opinion that actual good memorable music is like lightning in a bottle. I'm not a good music critic, nor am I a good art critic in general, so I'm gonna be talking out of my ass here, but I firmly believe that Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore have produced some of the most beautiful music to ever exist. I wrote out a piece in my Halo video where I glaze and suck the dick of Halo's score. Here it is. It's so crazy to me because at its core, Halo is a series about shooting aliens in the face, right? And yet each part of the experience, be it gameplay, cutscenes, or even just menu music, are all accompanied by this beautiful, ethereal soundscape. As pretentious as it sounds, the contrast of the violence depicted in the games and the heavenly score really adds a layer of depth to the whole experience. It almost makes you feel like you're not fighting just to shoot aliens in the face, you're fighting for something greater. No other series I've come across has even come close to capturing the same sense of a mix of valor and sorrow that Halo's score inspires. It's crazy, dude.
The music adds so much to the game that,
Like I said before, actual good memorable music is kind of like capturing lightning in a bottle. I think that it's so difficult to do that even O'Donnell and Salvatore's later work doesn't top it. Don't get me wrong, music of the Spheres is still excellent. They even did work with Paul fucking McCartney. It might just be the nostalgia I'm talking, but even though the music works, and it works very, very well, it didn't wow me nearly as much as Halo's tracks did. Again, I suck at music, so this is all just normie talk. So I don't really blame 343 too much for not having music up to par with the OG games. But it really sucks that this is the case though, cause it's just a further kick in the balls for how far from grace the series has fallen. I can grasp a little bit at what the composer was going for with Infinite's soundtrack. I think they were trying to quote unquote go back to Halo's roots, but the music throughout the entirety of the game just mostly feels inoffensive, bland, and personalityless. And basically all of the climactic tracks really lack energy. At first, I chalked my indifference to Infinite's soundtrack up to me not giving it enough time to sink in. After all, I have played the old games a bajillion times now, so it's possible that I just needed to hear the tracks a couple more times to get it stuck in my head. I've flipped Infinite 3 times when it first came out, and another 2 times for this video, so 5 times in total. Once on normal, twice on heroic, and twice on legendary. Nothing changed. Not one single track really stood out to me at any point in the game, except for the ones that were clear callbacks to tracks from the first games, and even the ones that are like exact melodic replicas of previous tracks still somehow manage to sound worse than the originals. Take The Road, for example, a remake of the famous Warthog run, one of Halo's most recognizable tracks. If you aren't already, I recommend using headphones for this next part. Okay, so I just played the climax of The Road from Halo Infinite. Now compare that to Halo 3's version of Warthog Run. Halo 3's version just has so much more energy and soul for whatever reason. It clearly evokes heroism, desperation, and finality. Infinite's version just sounds like a Sunday drive in comparison. What's crazy to me is that that wasn't even the climax of the Halo 3 track. This is the climax. And just because I want to gush about how much I love the track, here's a short clip of my favorite part of it. Each of those 3 snippets of that track I played have unmistakably more gravitas and weight than the Infinite one. Well, you could argue that I'm cherry picking, and it's an unfair comparison since 3 is clearly going for an epic ending to the trilogy. Maybe Halo 1's version of the Warthog run is a more apt comparison. Sadly, this isn't the case either. Halo 1's version still has more energy for whatever reason. creating new tracks and melodies as good as the originals is an impossibly high bar to leap over, so I can't fault the new composer for not doing that. But you'd think that recreating the original tracks that already exist would be the easiest things to match the quality of. Plus, you even have the luxury of hindsight or retrospection, so you could even add some things to top the old tracks, but this just isn't the case for some reason. And the story, oh my god, don't even get me started on the story in Infinite. Now, I'm not the best at analyzing and critiquing stories, so I'm not going to go too deep and analyze every single thing. But the story in Halo Infinite is such a literal nothing burger sequel baiting piece of shit. The entire story of Halo Infinite is just nothing. Halo 3's plot meandered in the beginning and then sped up way too fast towards the end. Infinite's just meanders all the time. The Banished are finally a decent adversary of humanity from the Prometheans in Halo 4, and fucking Cortana and whatever the hell fanfiction tier antagonist bullshit they came up with in Halo 5. And I still can't believe they made Cortana, of all people, a bad guy. But the Banished aren't nearly as threatening or as all-encompassing as the Covenant and the Flood are in every other Halo game. The Flood, in particular, is built to be the ultimate threat to all life in the galaxy. The stakes cannot get higher than that. Infinite introduces Atriox in the opening cutscene, but then he's not even in the fucking game at all past a couple of mentions from Banished Towers, Escharum, and like 2 other cutscenes. There's that one alien lady, I don't even know her fucking name, that's how utterly forgettable she is, who's a herald for the Endless, like there's some kind of super duper ancient evil, even more ancienter and eviler than the Flood. But I sincerely doubt 343 knows what the Endless even is themselves, and I'm willing to bet that they only mentioned the Endless to buy some time between now and their next game. They never once showed us how threatening and ancient and evil they are, making them fall completely flat. There's no clear enemy, no clear goal, no clear conclusion. They butchered the story so bad that it's foobar at this point, and they don't even know what to do next. They don't even know what they were doing for Infinite. Half the story is spent trying to fix and atone for the absolute debauchery Brian Reed was rubbing his nipples with in Halo 5, and the other half is spent giving the weapon and the pilot pointless character arcs. Well, okay, the pilot's arc is okay, but I really don't like the weapons. The pilot and the weapon are such nice, clean breaths of fresh, crisp air in comparison to the utterly colorless cast of characters in Halo 4 and 5. These two alone really help to add some levity and humanity to the overly melodramatic tone the series has taken a direction in since Halo Reach and even 3 to an extent. Unfortunately, their personality and initial characterization are about as far as my praise can go for these two. The pilot, at least, is more forgivable to me. He's more human and more vulnerable than any character we've seen so far, so it's interesting to see how Chief interacts with a civilian, as we've never really seen Chief talk or interact with anyone that isn't military personnel. So it makes a little bit of sense to see that Chief will go out of his way to comfort him and at one point save him, since he's like the only civvy on the ring. I still don't like how he has 24/7 access to Chief's comms, as in a certain moment in the game, he just butts into and noses his way into some character drama between Chief and the weapon, which felt really forced. He can really feel like an annoying baby sometimes, but I get it, he's just a civilian who wanted to help out, but got lassoed into the mess. Hence why I'm more understanding towards his character. As for the weapon, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with the weapon's character arc. Essentially, she gets mad that Chief was going to delete her if she showed some signs of acting like Cortana 2.0. You know, the genocidal AI that was gonna take over the galaxy. You'd think that as a clone of the brain of Catherine Halsey, one of the smartest people in the Halo universe, whose actions through the Spartan 2 program, although questionable, led to humanity's survival at the end of the Covenant War, the weapon would have the intelligence to be at least somewhat understanding of why Master Chief would be willing to delete her. Instead, after this whole debacle happens, she spends the next 2 levels passive-aggressively making snarky and irritating comments toward Chief until she's shown that Cortana was willing to destroy humanity. This makes her seem more like an angsty, irritating teenager than an AI built to save humanity. It's just pointless. It's like the developers saw the melodrama in The Last of Us and New God of War and decided that, oh, Master Chief and Cortana are just like those guys, let's make them like those guys. And then there are several cutscenes after climactic moments where Chief acts as sort of a mediator or a mentor figure, but the dialogue is so on the nose, it just falls completely flat for me.
I don't understand. You showed him respect. He was a monster.
Yes. But at the end, he was just a soldier.
I want to say that again, Bungie is not an idol of perfection, okay? None of the OG games were perfect. Halo 3, my favorite in the series, had a weird, disconnected plot that didn't make much sense. Halo 2 had the strongest writing, and it's clear that the writing was downgraded in Halo 3. But good God, holy hell, did 3 have some fantastic dialogue. Take this part for example. It's my favorite scene in Halo 3, where Chief reunites with Cortana.
You found me. But so much of me is wrong. Out of place. You might be too late.
You know me. When I make a promise.
You keep it. I do know how to pick 'em.
Lucky me. Do you still have it?
The activation index from the first Halo ring. A little souvenir I hung on to, just in case. Got an escape plan?
Thought I'd try shooting my way out. Mix things up a little.
Just keep your head down. There's 2 of us in here now, remember?
Even if you've never played a single Halo game before and started with 3, this short cutscene can get you up to speed with Chief and Cortana, because their almost flirtatious conversation is suggestive of their relationship. It perfectly prods and hints at what the 2 of them are normally like, without ever outright saying it, all without dropping everything all of a sudden to say something philosophical about the nature of mankind or war or something. They do so much with so little. Infinite's dialogue seems just so excessive and on the nose a lot of the time. It's so amateurish and juvenile, almost more juvenile than when I talk about farts and poo and sucking dicks or whatever. I'm not sure why 343 feels the need to add so much melodrama between characters, especially between Chief and Cortana. I know that Bungie is no stranger to melodrama either. I'm having a hard time trying to explain my problem with the writing, but I think a good point of reference to help me out is a certain cutscene in Halo 2 Anniversary. In this cutscene, Spartan Locke talks with the Arbiter about the mission to capture Master Chief.
I do not trust you. He may, but I do not.
Noted.
My friend's trust is not the issue today, Spartan Locke. It is my trust you must earn.
Arbiter?
You are a hunter, yes. A seeker of things.
That's not the official job title, but it's close enough.
And now you hunt other Spartans.
I'm not so much hunting a Spartan as I'm hunting the Spartan.
You seek.
117.
I was not told the identity of your prey.
That is why I'm sharing it with you now. We're talking about trust, after all. May I ask you something? Your people used to call him Demon. Was that an insult or a compliment?
An insult, to be sure, but one with a modicum of respect. He was indeed my enemy, but in time, I named him ally, even friend. The events which forged this bond were complicated.
First of all, I think this whole cutscene and the entire story of Halo 5 for that matter is fucking dumb, but that's beside the point. I feel like the writers at 343 just don't understand the major characters. Arby wouldn't walk up all cool like that out of the shadows. He wouldn't talk about earning respect or whatever, and neither would he have an intimidating presence about him. Intentionally, of course. He is a gigantic alien after all. Past his initial fight with Johnson and Miranda, and his encounter with Gravemind, where he still wanted to destroy humanity, he acted as has a sincere voice of reason in every cutscene he was in. Almost every piece of dialogue he spoke was either out of curiosity or in service of ending the bloodshed. Even when Arby and the Chief were up in each other's faces and you knew these two motherfuckers just wanted to tear each other apart, Arby still acted and spoke with dignity, even being the first one to disengage from the conflict. And so you'll have to forgive me for thinking that this cutscene just feels like shitty fanfiction. He just feels like a generic, intimidating warlord here and not the actual Arbiter. Furthermore, the big thing I want to talk about is his perception of Master Chief. When talking about Chief, Arbiter says, "He was indeed my enemy. In time, I named him ally, even friend." I don't think the Arbiter would sum up his relationship with the Chief using the word friend. In fact, I don't think he would even speak that much about his opinion on Chief, with someone like Locke especially. I think that Arby and the Chief's relationship is much deeper and more complicated than that. Something closer to brother is more apt. While they may not have much love for each other, they certainly share a kind of respect that's only forged through suffering, because they're just two soldiers bound by circumstance who are forced to see the humanity in one another. Their interactions with each other are largely unspoken forms of acknowledgement. I'm not a writing critic by any means, but I think the word unspoken is the word that Infinite really lacks. There's a famous technique used by writers called show, don't tell. There is far too much tell going on in Infinite. There are too many instances of characters opening up and talking about their feelings or opinions on things. This is especially bad when it comes to Chief, a character known for his stoicism. Bottling up your feelings and never talking about it in real life can be unhealthy and even dangerous in some circumstances. But this kind of thing certainly makes for some interesting storytelling, doesn't it? I feel like the same misunderstanding of Arbiter's character applies to their misunderstanding of Chief and Cortana as well. 343 doesn't seem to understand that Chief and Cortana's relationship was never about verbose or emotional confessionals. Even though they seem inseparable, their conversations were super sparse, all things considered. I'm both too dumb and too lazy to go back and really count how many lines they had with each other, but I'm willing to bet that Chief didn't have more than 100 lines directly addressed to Cortana throughout the entire trilogy. And even when they did talk, their conversations were often brief and tactical, with their warmth and affection for each other as the undertone. I understand and appreciate what they were going for with the drama between Chief and Cortana in Halo 4. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that this cutscene where Chief reminisces about Cortana is a great scene.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
They say that, like, soldiers and humanity are two different things. And soldiers aren't machines. We're just people. I'll let you have the deck to yourself.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
But only in a vacuum. Stripped out of context, the scene really works well on its own, as it's just a nice, quiet reflection on loss. 343 thinks that making characters cry, argue, or monologue about working through all their trauma makes them more human. I wouldn't exactly disagree with this, but when you apply it to specifically Halo's main characters, it kinda creates a dissonance with whom these characters were established as in the originals. It's as if 343 wanted to modernize Halo's tone, but ended up sanding off what made its characters so compelling to me. It's restraint. Bungie's Chief was never a guy who needed to reflect on his own feelings because he was too busy saving everyone else. 343's Chief just keeps explaining himself. Of course, these are all non-gameplay related gripes, so super hardcore gamers might say that none of that stuff matters and only gameplay does. And sure, that's fair. Games should have good gameplay first and foremost. But it's just like Halo Infinite's campaign doesn't even have that nailed down that well, because the combat itself is as fun as it's ever been, but only in isolation because it's weighed down by the legendary curse, the open world, and shitty boss design. Not once has 343 topped a single non-gameplay auxiliary component Bungie has set the bar for. Not the story, not the music, not those tiny little touches of personality and attention to detail like explosions or menu screens. When Halo Infinite first came out, I remember reading a surprising number of comments in different Halo Infinite reviews, each saying Halo Infinite isn't even that bad. Crying emoji. Give 343 a chance. First of all, I agree that Infinite wasn't all bad. I've been giving these assholes chances since 2012. It's 2025, dude. They've had the IP for like over a decade now, and they don't even have a single good across the board Halo game exemplary of why I should keep giving them chances. They just keep dragging my boy through the mud. I also remember seeing an alarming number of 343 defenders that say something along the lines of, wow, haha, if the game isn't to their exact liking, Doomers will just call it shit. And I hate this kind of stuff so much because it shows that people are willing to defend consistently getting lower quality games, which are worse than games we've already gotten. It's like these people are saying, you guys don't like eating shit? Your standards are way too high, all while bending over a table and spreading their ass cheeks to receive Microsoft's big, fat, trillion-dollar microdong. I guess all of this just goes back to the two gay wolves that have come inside me, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, specifically the gay wolf who is an uncompromising art critic. If we don't count ODST and Reach, the series has already wrapped up perfectly after 3. All the loose ends were tied up, albeit imperfectly with how the flood was handled. From the art critic's perspective, nothing after 3 matters. None of this chicanery would have happened if the series just ended there, or at least Reach. I'm too dumb and too lazy to really think hard about where exactly the problems contributing to the downfall of Halo have come from. It could be the infuriating leadership that literally hire people that hate Halo for some reason. It could be the super bespoke blam engine that they have to train everyone from scratch for. It could be their nonsensical contractual terms where they force a huge number of employees they've trained for 18 months to leave. It could be a combination of all of these things. But one thing I think we all know for sure, why they keep shitting out cruddy game after cruddy game, it's about the money. It's always about the money with these guys. This is Microsoft we're talking about. The second biggest company in the world by market capitalization at $3.7 trillion or whatever right now. Halo only exists now for Microsoft to milk every last penny out of, and I'm willing to bet that if I went to one of their student time meetings and asked one of the top shareholders who the main protagonist of the mainline Halo games is, they'd probably just say John Halo or something. Because the top dogs don't really care about the franchise, the series is devoid of good creative direction, so much so that their next rumored release doesn't even look like a brand new Halo game. It just looks like a remake of a game that has been remastered already, and poorly at that. I've already made a video on remakes, but essentially my thoughts on them are that I'm not totally against them, as I really like the RE2 and RE4 makes, but I'll be darned if they're not a signifier of the industry's creative bankruptcy and rampant consumerism, where developers are so devoid of creativity right now that the only good games they can come up with are retreads of things that have already been done. And the other side of it is that fans, including me, will just eat up any slap these assholes shit out, even if it's already been made before. I rolled my fucking eyes when I saw that stupid reveal of Mark IV Master Chief brandishing an energy sword. I really couldn't give two shits that they're leaning toward an Unreal and Blam hybrid engine. As if the normal mapping on some ice or the texture filtering on some trees or whatever is supposed to wow me and make me forget how shitty the series has become. There's also another rumor of some kind of exclusively live service Halo Battle Royale. This is just a rumor, but assuming that is true, I want to say that I have nothing against battle royales, but I really dislike the idea of a Halo game solely focusing on becoming one, because it further pigeonholes Halo into becoming every other shooter. If it was just a multiplayer mode, and not the biggest one that it's solely focused on, okay, then I'd be perfectly fine with it. Going back to when Infinite first came out, I saw some discussions about the state of Halo, and I kept seeing the attitude that people just want Halo to be big or popular again, and they're wanting the series to branch out into different game genres to broadly gather as many audiences as they can. like the Battle Royale audience, for example. No smoke to anyone who thinks this. I'm sure this sentiment comes out of a place of sincerity because deep down, I want Halo to be popular again too. All I'd say to these people is, be careful what you wish for, even though not in the exact same fashion. Halo has essentially done this already by changing some core gameplay elements and also taking on a brand new, and might I say, extremely fucking ugly art style. There are a number of IPs out there that have done this or are currently doing this, which have become hollow shells of what they once were. Halo basically is already in this fucking state, but still, chasing trends is easy, and strengthening or even preserving an identity isn't, as exemplified in each of 343's Halos. Halo was once a trendsetter, not a trend chaser, believe it or not, and to have once beheld the pale Halo horse, only to watch it be beaten past a pulp into a pink mist, makes me really want to piss and shit my pants in frustration. But as doomer as I sounded for the past how many minutes, I'm not in complete doomer mode. I probably will never go full doomer mode. I'll still always keep an eye out for the next Halo game. From what I've seen, some people super fed up with 343 like to reiterate that Halo fans have to move on, and I don't know if I have the balls to fully move on like that. As General George S. Ulysses D. Jones once said, it is foolish and wrong to mourn the video game franchises that died. Rather, we should thank God that such video games lived. And so, I have a bunch of feelings on the current state of Halo. There's a really strange mix of hope, cope, and sadness, but also happiness for the simple fact that Halo is a franchise that I very much care about. I still think that the series should have ended after 3 for sure, but we all know that's not going to happen. I'm content with the fact that we'll never really get the same soul of the OG Halo games back again, and that's mostly by design because the story was meant to wrap up in the trilogy, and since so many of the same people who worked on the original games are no longer working on Halo. So at the very least, since it's guaranteed that there's gonna be more Halo games in the future, I hope that they just make a good fucking game, bro. That's all I'm asking for. An all-around good game. One that doesn't have broken features at launch, one that doesn't have a piece of shit plot and juvenile dialogue, one that isn't mid or below mid. I just want a fucking good game, man. If they're not gonna let the series die, then just at least give me that. I want to go back to the very first part of the video where I said that I was aware that my opinion on the state of Halo wasn't unpopular at all. I've recently tuned into a couple of streams from different YouTubers I've never watched before, because I've mostly just followed big Halo YouTubers like Hidden Xperia and Mint Blitz. I read some of the chats and listened to some of the streamers themselves. To my surprise, when I was tuning into these streams, so many people, not just the streamers themselves, have grown just as cynical, jaded, and tired as I have from repeatedly being disappointed. I've even read a comment on one of these VODs that shared the exact same sentiment that I do about puppeteering corpses and whatnot. So, I'm quite relieved that a large number of Halo fans feel the same way I do. I was also going to say something cool like we have strength in numbers, but honestly it's such a sad thing that so many of us feel this way in the first place. So despite all that stuff, I hope you got something valuable out of this video. I know it felt good for me to vent out some of my issues on the subject. I think I wrote out everything I wanted to, so to conclude, thank you so much for watching.